On this channel, I cover stories that you need to know, but that the mainstream media is not telling you about. This is not a joke, this is a real story, and you need to know about this. There's a secret cult of vegan transgender serial killers operating in the US, and they are currently on the loose. Let me just say up front, this story is about transgender people. But I think we have to be careful whenever we deal with a really horrible story like this one, that we do not think that all transgender people are like this. I know some transgender people. Not all transgender people are serial killers. But there are some that are serial killers, and that is what we're going to talk about today. Also keep in mind that a lot of what I'm going to be talking about are allegations. I am doing my best to gather the information that is available. I need to give credit to independent journalist Andy No, who has done some excellent reporting on this, but our information is still limited. What makes this story so difficult is that the mainstream media is not reporting on this. Why won't the news tell you about these transgender serial killers? I don't get it. So I'm doing the best that I can to get the best information possible, but these are still allegations. I'm not trying to start a mob to go after these people. They deserve their day in court. I just want to get you the information so that you know what is going on. I'm hoping that we can arrest these people and then figure out the missing details during a criminal trial. So what happened? On January 20th, the same day that Donald Trump was sworn into office, a Border Patrol officer was killed in a shootout in Vermont near the Canadian border. The officer was David Malland. The Border Patrol was following a German national named Felix Ophelia Buchholz. From this photo, it looks like Felix was transitioning from a man to a woman. But I have to be honest. In this whole video, I have a hard time telling who is a man and who is a woman. I don't know what pronouns to use anymore, so please forgive me if I use the wrong pronoun. I'm doing my best. My understanding is that Felix was a biological man using female pronouns. In the shootout, both the Border Patrol officer and Felix Buchholz were killed. Felix was riding in the car with another transgender person named Teresa Milo Consuelo Youngblood. It looks like Teresa was transitioning from a female to a male and goes by ze, them, theirs pronouns. Teresa is actually the person who fired the shots that killed the Border Patrol officer. Teresa was injured by the return fire, but is still alive and is under arrest. When people started looking into this story, they started to notice some strange connections. Teresa Youngblood had filed a marriage application a few months ago to someone named Maximilian Bentley Snyder. Maximilian is currently facing a different murder charge in Vallejo, California. That's not the only strange coincidence. The gun that was used to kill the Border Patrol officer was the same gun purchased by Michelle Jacqueline Zajko in the suspicious deaths of her parents in Pennsylvania. By suspicious deaths, I mean they were shot execution style. Michelle is currently wanted by the police as a person of interest in those two deaths. So all these transgender people are connected in murders across the country. If anyone was counting, we are already up to 4 related murders. We have Vermont, California, and Pennsylvania. This group of people are operating all across the US. The common thread that connects them is they were all involved in a cult in San Francisco called Zizian. This group was led by someone named Jack Ziz LaSota. Some people thought that this leader, Ziz, had died in 2022 because there is an obituary that Ziz had drowned. But it is now proven that Ziz actually faked his death. Here are court documents from the following year in 2023 where Ziz was detained in the case I already mentioned of the deaths of Michelle Zajko's parents. For some reason, the judge in the case lowered his bail from $500,000 to $10,000. Ziz bailed himself out and has since disappeared. There is currently a warrant out for his arrest. So the leader of this murder cult is currently on the loose and is wanted by the police. What do we know about this cult? Ziz is a very educated person. He previously interned at NASA. Here he is talking about his work.
My name is Jack LaSota. I just graduated with a BS in computer engineering from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. This fall, I'm going to be a grad student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I am working this summer on a software tool that I started last summer. It's used to perform stereoscopic calculations on coronagraphs from the spacecraft Stereo and SOHO, which are used to measure coronal mass ejection trajectories and predict space weather.
So he's very smart. In fact, all these people in the cult are very intellectual and highly educated. Do you remember Felix Ophelia Buchholz, who died in the shootout with the Border Patrol? She was making $500,000 per year working in tech. That's what you need to understand. These cult members are the trans children of rich families living in San Francisco. They're highly educated and they work in tech. The leader, Ziz, lived in San Francisco in order to work in the field of AI risk. Originally, Ziz organized a group of people to live on boats in San Francisco Bay. The idea was to live on the boats rent-free, but still live close enough to do business with people in the high-tech industry. Here's the boat Ziz was living on. Here's a picture of Ziz on the boat. He would wear these long black robes. Eventually, it became difficult to live on the boats, so the group moved. They might also have moved because Ziz faked his death by drowning. Either way, they decided to start living in box trucks. They would find vacant land to squat on, pull up their trucks next to each other, and live inside. We actually have a statement from someone who went inside one of the trucks. He describes it as, "It was actually very uncomfortable. You kind of wanted to put on a hazmat suit before going into it. It was really just creepy in the extreme." Okay, let me just give you a word of advice. If you know of a serial killer with a box truck, do not go inside. What is this person doing going inside this box truck? Of course it's creepy. The way the cult worked is that everything was based on a philosophy called functional decision theory. The cult members would analyze every situation using logical theories to justify their actions. Remember that these were highly educated tech people. We know about this because Ziz wrote numerous blog posts about his philosophy. He believed that every person was made of two cores that represent the left and right hemispheres of their brains. In order to become a good person, you needed both cores of your brain to be working correctly. That means that people could exist in three different states: non-good, single good, or double good. Single good was if they had one good working core, and double good was if they had two good working cores. Ziz believed that 95% of the population had two bad working cores, and he considered them non-good. Roughly 5% of the population had at least one working core and was single good. Only 1/4 of 1% of people had two working cores and were double good. Of course, Ziz believed that he was one of the rare double good people. He would tell his followers that they were likely single good people, but if they followed his guidance and did what he told them, that he could help them become double good people. An example of this is convincing his followers to become vegan. That was part of the cult. The Zizians believed that killing animals was unethical. Therefore, you could never become double good unless you converted to becoming vegan. Now, this is just my opinion, but I always found vegans to be a little bit strange. I don't know how you feel about this, but I am a red-blooded American, and I like to eat some red meat. Another thing they would practice is something called unihemispheric sleep. You would get someone to an exhausted state. Then you would relax one side of your body while you try to stimulate the other side of your body. The goal of this was to access one side of your brain at a time while the other side slept. Ziz explained that this would help people to achieve double core status, but it resulted in hallucinations and making people easy to manipulate. By doing unihemispheric sleep, you're essentially forcing your body to accept a split personality. I want to read you a passage from the blog by Ziz so that you can understand how he thinks. Also in the context of talking about consequentialism, I told a story about a time I had killed 4 ants in a bathtub where I wanted to take a shower before going to work. How I had considered, can I just not take a shower, and presumed me smelling bad at work would, because of big numbers and the fate of the world and stuff, make the world worse than the deaths of 4 basically causally isolated people. I said I didn't know whether ants had feelings or not, but I ran empathy in a I have a feeling what I'm doing way for the people they might have been. I considered getting paper in a cup and taking them elsewhere, and I figured there were decent odds that if I did, I'd be late to work, and it would also probably make the world worse in the long run. This is really creepy. He is obsessing over taking the life of these ants. And then he does this mental exercise where he imagines the ants are people as he kills them. Now, I realize that killing some ants does not make you a serial killer, but this is something different. He is fantasizing while doing it. There's no emotion. You get a sense that everything is rational. He uses logic to justify his actions, but his justification is based on a really trivial inconvenience. That he is right to kill these ants because they are making him late for work. Do you understand what he is saying? He is saying that if these ants were human beings, he would be justified in murdering them if they were making him late for work. This reminds me of something. There was a film made by Alfred Hitchcock in 1960 called Psycho. Have any of you seen this movie? The story is about a psycho killer named Norman Bates who runs a hotel. He would dress in women's clothes and kill the guests in his hotel. At the end of the movie, he watches a fly crawl over his hand, and he's thinking to himself about whether or not to kill the fly. Am I the only person who sees a comparison here? These serial killers are just like the person in the movie Psycho. Only this is not a movie, this is real life. What is even more creepy is Ziz finishes this blog post about the ants with the famous quote, "History will remember us as the villains, but it's worth it if it means there will be a future." Someone needs to explain to Ziz. Sometimes history remembers you as a villain because you might actually just be a villain. Let me explain these murders so that you understand how bad they are. Remember the deaths of the parents of Michelle Zajko who were shot execution style. These were the same deaths that Ziz was arrested as part of and then released on bail. The allegation is that Ziz convinced Zajko to murder her parents in order to prove her allegiance to the cult. With her parents dead, she could take her significant inheritance and use it to fund the cult. If that is true, that's really creepy. The third murder was of the man who owned the lands the Zizians were squatting on in California with their box trucks. This was an 82-year-old man who was attacked by 3 members of the cult. They repeatedly stabbed him with a sword, and then they used the sword to cut out his eyeball. Somehow the man survived and was going to testify against them in court. Then another cult member, Snyder, attacked him and slit his throat. Now the man is dead. I feel so bad for this poor guy. Imagine that you own a piece of property, and one day a group of transgender serial killers show up and start living on your property in a bunch of box trucks. And then when you go to tell them to get off your land, they try to kill you. This poor man was the only eyewitness to the first attack. Now that he's dead, these cult members are likely to go free. Do you understand what is going on? There's not just one serial killer in America. There's a whole group of them, and they're working together. The Zizians are killing anyone who speaks out against them, and their leader is currently on the loose. I don't understand why no one in the mainstream media is reporting on this. Meanwhile, it's not even been 1 month since Donald Trump took office. He has attempted to correct some of the transgender extremism that we have all experienced over the last 4 years. If I could describe Trump's approach on this issue, he thinks people are free to become transgender if they want, but everyone else also has the freedom not to participate in their sexual experimentation. Other people should not be forced to use anyone's pronouns, or have them read to your kids in school, or be forced to change next to them in the locker room. So Donald Trump has been rolling back all the ways that people were using the government to force other people to accept transgenders. He declared that the US government will only recognize 2 sexes. He imposed a nationwide restriction on gender-affirming care for children. He ordered that transgender prisoners be housed with other inmates of their biological sex. He ordered that transgender people be removed from the military. Again, he's not stopping you from becoming transgender. He's just saying that if you're in the military, your bunkmate should not be forced to live with your transgender choices, and the military should not have to pay for your transgender surgeries. He ordered that transgender athletes are banned from women's sports. Again, he's not stopping you from becoming transgender. He's just saying you cannot take away the rights of biological women who should not have to compete against biological men. The Democrats have been fighting against all these actions by filing lawsuits in court. When Trump had the CDC remove their webpage on transgender medical care, a lobbying group for doctors filed a lawsuit to stop the White House actions. In their complaint, they claim the removal of this information deprives researchers of access to information that is necessary for treating patients. Really, doctors? You can't just use Google instead? Well, one judge named John Bates in D.C. ruled this week against Donald Trump and said that he was ordering the president to put the web pages back up. How is this possible? Let me see if I understand this. This judge thinks that he can tell the president what web pages he can and cannot put up. Really? It sounds like this judge is trying to assert control over the executive branch. This is absurd and clearly against the Constitution. Just so you understand who this judge is, he's been doing things like this for a long time. Do you remember in the January 6 cases when the Supreme Court overturned 1512c2? This was the felony charge the prosecutors were using to convict people who peacefully walked through the Capitol building. Well, this judge, John Bates, oversaw many of these cases, including someone named Matthew Perna. Matthew Perna never got the chance to see the Supreme Court overturn his conviction. Matthew Perna committed suicide because he could not handle the unfair treatment he received under this judge. Now, I want to explain this because people are not aware about what happened to Matthew Perna. He was in the Capitol building for 30 minutes. He was not violent, he did not cause any damage, he did not take anything. He even stayed within the velvet ropes. When he heard the FBI was looking for him, Matthew Perna turned himself in. The DOJ threatened him with the felony charge of 1512c2. Even though he did not want to, Matthew Perna agreed to plead guilty for 6 to 12 months in prison because he didn't think he would get a better outcome with a biased DC jury. Then right before he was supposed to appear for sentencing, the DOJ called him up and said they were going to add a terrorism enhancement to his sentence, which would end up being 41 to 72 months. They just changed the sentence that he had already agreed to and somehow justified it by saying he was a terrorist. Just to remind you, it is the judge that is in charge of sentencing. It was this judge, John Bates, that allowed them to do this. That is why Matthew Perna committed suicide. He was trapped in this horrible situation arranged by this judge. Even though the Supreme Court would eventually rule that Matthew Perna was an innocent man, this judge decided to sentence him as a terrorist. In my opinion, it is Judge John Bates that is responsible for his suicide. Let me tell you something else about this judge. Have you heard about Trump shutting down USAID because of all the fraudulent payments? Well, it turns out that this judge's wife runs an NGO that is funded by USAID. His wife, Carol Rees, is the founder of Hope for Children. How can this judge not be considered to have a conflict of interest when his wife is getting money from the agency Trump just shut down for fraud? This judge needs to be removed from the bench and have his law license taken away. But these doctors were not the only people complaining about Trump. In defiance of Trump's policies, the Worcester City Council in Massachusetts just voted to become a transgender sanctuary city. Listen to these comments at the meeting before their vote.
If you say that you're afraid of Trump and that's why you don't want the city to be a safe space for trans people, you better prepare for trans people to make this a very unsafe space.
Is that a threat? Did this person just threaten transgender violence? The city of Worcester is not that far away from where the Border Patrol officer was shot by one of the transgender serial killers. I really don't think that this person should be threatening violence.
Can you look at me and tell me how many of my friends need to die before you do anything?
Please wrap up.
Look at me!
Okay, we're all done here.
Fucking pathetic!
No, we're all done. Come on.
Why are these people so violent? Is it just me, or does this person seem completely unhinged and out of control? I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but a lot of the mass shootings of the last few years have been transgender people. Do you remember the Nashville school shooting? 6 people were killed, including 3 9-year-olds. Innocent children. I cannot imagine what the parents of those 3 children had to go through. But that was not the only shooting by a transgender person. The Lakewood church shooter has not been confirmed as transgender, but they used both male and female names. The Club Q shooter in Colorado said he was non-binary. The Colorado school shooter was transgender. The shooter in Aberdeen, Maryland was transgender. All these shooters were transgender, non-binary, or some other similar category. And now we are seeing transgender serial killers. A reasonable person would have to consider that maybe there's a trend happening here. Again, I'm not saying that all transgender people are violent, but I don't think it's unreasonable with all of these gruesome murders that we start asking a few questions. For starters, is there any connection between mental illness and being transgender? Is there any correlation? How about side effects for any of these medications that they're on? It's been well known for a long time that steroids can create what is known as roid rage. Do any of these transgender drugs create anything similar? In the case of the transgender serial killers, we have people who are on lack of sleep, they are malnourished because they are vegan, and they are taking transgender drugs on top of that. Does anyone think that that combination could be a problem? I don't know about you, but I am tired of hearing the argument that transgender people will commit suicide if we don't cave in to all of their demands. I have seen those studies, and they are debatable. What is not debatable is all the people who are dead from these horrible murders by transgender people. I don't care what this judge thinks. President Trump, take those websites down. And while you're at it, can you please direct the FBI to look into this cult of vegan transgender serial killers? That would be great. This is the type of thing that the government is supposed to protect us against. They're supposed to keep us safe from serial killers. What is the FBI doing? I've not heard them doing anything about this. We are still waiting on the final Senate confirmation vote for Kash Patel to be the new FBI director. What are these senators waiting for? We have multiple serial killers on the loose. Let Kash Patel get to work and solve this case. I don't know what is going on in Washington, D.C., but this is the one job they are supposed to do. They are supposed to be keeping us safe. I cannot believe that these senators are playing political games, and meanwhile we have no one running the FBI while we have serial killers on the loose. We need Kash Patel sitting at his desk working on this. President Trump, what are you doing about this? Here's what I would do if I were Trump. I would call Kash Patel into my office and I would say, Kash, I'm going to give you 7 days. You have 7 days to find and arrest these people before they kill again. I feel like 7 days is enough time. I have to believe that if you use the full resources of the US government, that you could find someone in 7 days. If Trump wants to show us that the FBI can actually do something good for once, do this. Catch the serial killers. I hope that Kash Patel gets confirmed soon and gets to work protecting the American people. When you hear a story that is this dark and depressing, I think it's important to remember what we stand for. There is goodness in all of us, and that is how we beat back the darkness. When our founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence, they wrote that our unalienable rights included life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They wrote that. We are here in America to be happy. We're here to raise a family. We're here to find love. We are here to live an amazing life. Let us not forget that we live in a place where you can achieve your dreams. That is what makes America special. And all the lies and the corruption, and yes, even the serial killers, cannot stand up against the American dream. In the words of the movie Braveheart, they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. Now I want to hear from you. Do you agree with me that the FBI needs to look into this? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos. Also, if you find independent journalism like this helpful, consider signing up to be a monthly member on my website, wolvesandfinance.com. For $6 a month, your support helps me to keep making these videos. Thank you so much for your support. I'm Zach from Wolves and Finance. Thank you for watching.